I'm just very grateful. I will honestly sing the praises of Neighborhood Legal Services till my last breath.
It was a blessing for me.
I learned that I have a voice in what they were doing too.
They really helped me in a big way.
It all began with an extraordinary new vision that free lawyers for poor people, located right in the neighborhood, could partner with community members to blaze a pathway of opportunity, enable residents to climb out of poverty, overcome oppressive systems and practices, and secure equal access to and the protections of the law for everyone.
You have to think about how the concept got started. Of course, it came out of the War on Poverty programming, but in the larger sense, legal services, it really is a part of the civil rights movement and one of its most successful pieces.
As one of the first federally funded OEO programs, Neighborhood Legal Services pioneered the concept of embedding lawyers in the community. In 1969, the law firm of Covington and Burling started sending 2 associates and 2 secretaries to NLSP for rotating 6-month stints. One of the first to go was Associate Bing Leverich.
There were public housing tenants, private housing tenants whose buildings were loaded with housing code violations and infested with rats and roaches and things of that sort. If they had withheld their rent, they would have been evicted from their dwellings, and that happened all the time.
But that was soon to change.
The lawyers at Neighborhood Legal Services turned landlord-tenant law on its head, upside down.
I think that a great deal of impact work comes out of cases that began as garden variety individual landlord-tenant cases where a lawyer in a neighborhood office would mount a ferocious defense and often a very creative defense. That was the case, for example, with Edwards versus Habib, which was handled by Brian Olmsted, who's absolutely brilliant, creative lawyer. Yvonne Edwards showed up in a neighborhood office one day, I think with an eviction notice, I think with a marshal's notice, and Brian went to what was then called the Court of General Sessions to move to vacate the default judgment that had led to the marshal's notice on Brian's totally innovative and brilliant argument that the attempted eviction was in retaliation for Mrs. Edwards' having complained about housing code violations.
The default was vacated. NLSP tried Ms. Edwards' case, lost, again appealed, and petitioned for federal appellate review. The Circuit Court of Appeals saw it differently and issued its influential decision that established that tenants could not be evicted in retaliation for complaints about conditions, a core protection which is the law in most jurisdictions today.
As we were on the first wave of cases, it was easier. There were so many injustices there that you could hardly decide which one to go for.
Those cases arose from NLSP's neighborhood-based presence, as does our work today. We retain our strong community connections through the presence of our 3 offices in low-income neighborhoods, including 2 east of the river. We also establish and maintain deep partnerships with community-based organizations. NLSP's partnership with the Community Services Agency of the Metro Washington AFL-CIO's Building Futures program is a great example.
We decided to partner with Neighborhood Legal Services to be able to address the major legal issues that we saw our clients have. You have been able to assist, and they are now actually working full-time. They are able to support their families. They have actually the possibility of thinking ahead and realizing that they can live the career path of their dreams.
My name is Anthony Petway. I've actually been living in Washington, D.C. my entire life. I was trying to find work at little mom and pop stores in little in and out places, McDonald's, Walmart, places like that, the baseball stadium. None of it actually panned out for me.
Then, Mr. Petway enrolled in the Building Futures pre-apprentice program. He completed his training and was poised for employment, except he was threatened with child support enforcement proceedings for back child support he could not pay. He was facing possible incarceration for the failure to pay, additional fines, and more debt, and critically, suspension of his driver's license. Enter Neighborhood Legal Services Program.
I went to court for him and on a fairly short time period filed a motion to modify the child support order and was ultimately successful. And with that reduction, he was able to keep his license.
Without my license, I wouldn't have had the qualifications for the Washington Gas job. That is, I would say, the number one requirement for them, because you're obligated to drive company vehicles.
So now Mr. Petway has a fantastic job and is able to pay for medical and financial support for all of his children.
Many of the very same problems NLSP tackled at the beginning are still formidable challenges for NLSP's clients. Perhaps the most serious involves substandard housing. When poor housing and predatory practices converge, the consequences are horrific. Take the case of Mr. Edwards.
I stayed in that cold apartment somewhat like, I think about 2.5 weeks. I got in contact with my counselor. They say, look, you have to go and contact Neighborhood Legal Service. But they were the only one that could help you. I got into the Neighborhood Legal Service, and it was really a 360. They started rolling that same day, and I got my voucher. They are still working for me. Found out that she was doing it to other people.
Update. NLSP reports landlord to government authorities. Landlord's license to operate community residential facility revoked. Lawsuit against landlord pending. Stay tuned for further development. Meaningful access to the courts requires a level playing field. Despite our commitment to equal justice under law, those who have to navigate contentious court cases without a lawyer find the field far from level. That's what Dwight Osbrooks found when he tried to fight to remain involved in his son's upbringing.
My situation was a custody for my son. Typically from a male perspective of, you see your son on weekends and you really don't have as much say-so about what goes on in his life. You pay money and that's it. That's your role. Not really in the development of him, not in his in any type of growth, mentally, physically, spiritually, him understanding what it is to be a young man, in particular my son Black, so what it is to be a young Black man, particularly what's going on in our country right now. The thinking everything is fair, and it's not, whether it's good or bad, you just want him to be prepared and ready for the world. I had gotten to a point where, whatever the judge said, whatever was going to happen, you're just going to have to just take it. And that's just the way it is. I thought I was doing, and this goes backwards, but I thought what I was doing was, hey, I can just mirror what the other lawyer was doing. And because I was not an officer of the court, I was told, sit down. You can't talk. You can't speak. And I was like, what is going on here? Just people are talking, having conversations. They're discussing what is going to happen with my son, what is going to happen next, and I have no say-so in it. Doesn't make a difference if you're here. It doesn't make a difference if you feel right or wrong. You have no advocate, none at all. And whatever happens is going to happen, and you just deal with it. And if something bad comes about because of it, so what? You're just another person here. We tried, and on with the next one. And I just felt like a number.
Until NLSP agreed to represent him.
The quality of lawyership, I guess if that's the term, that I received here was far superior than what I had paid for. It was unbelievable. The eventual outcome of the case was that I had 50-50. It really gave a chance for both he and his mother and me to be a part of his life. If you need help and you've exhausted what you believe, or just if you've gone through the normal processes, the Neighborhood Legal Service is here to fight for you.
NLSP remains a vital, critically needed force in the community.
Just having this type of resource in the community is awesome.
It's both a privilege and a fantastic responsibility to be one of those people who will treat their problems like they really matter.
NLSP, embarking on another half century of serving clients and creating lasting change in our community.